Thanks, Mike. Yeah, and thanks everyone. First off, it's so good to be here. As Mike knows, this is actually a little bit of a dream of mine. I mean, we've been partners with Ionic for about 6 years now, ever since beta. And I'm one of the people that probably every couple months hits up the entire Ionic team and asks, hey, when's there gonna be an Ionic conference? So I'm so freaking excited to be here and to be able to talk with everyone. A little bit about me. Well, I guess I should say, what I'm talking about is creating a product launch strategy, as he said. A little bit about me. My name is Jedi. I go by Jedi. I've heard every Star Wars joke known to man. So feel free to make as many as you'd like to, and I'll tell you whether or not I've heard it or not. I'm a developer by trade, right? So I started coding. I think it was like around 1998, when a video game called Tribes 2 came out. And it was a first-person shooter, and if anyone ever played it, you know that in order to have a clan page in Tribes 2, you had to custom code it through HTML and CSS. So I learned to code literally for video games, because video games are one of my passions. And I've just been doing that ever since. Now I do more operations at our company, and I do more of strategic vision and helping clients from a business standpoint. And a technology standpoint, be that bridge and that gap. And I've spoken about different topics related to mobile applications, software topics, software processes, combining like design and development teams, startup processes and startup recommendations, across the world. So I'm very happy to share my experiences with everyone today. We've built so many different applications from the West Coast to the East Coast, to Latin America, all the way to New Zealand was our furthest customer. So we've had a lot of experiences, and I'm here today to share those with you. I cannot share those experiences and claim 100% credit. I do have to give a big shout out to my team, OpenForge, and the team members there. I mean, these guys and gals are fantastic at what they do. And as Mike said, we specialize in just mobile applications. So that's our focus point, because there is so much in the mobile space. All right, so let's get started here. So we're going to talk today about creating a product launch strategy and everything that goes with it, right? So one of the things to keep in mind is that when you're building out a product, often a lot of people are going to think to themselves, okay, well, I have this fantastic idea, so let me just build a quick proof of concept, just prove that the idea is possible, especially if it's on the more technical level. And then after I build this proof of concept, I'm going to do a couple of iterations over it, to really like perfect it. And then once it's really near perfection, I'm going to go to a beta release, right? And then from there, I'm going to go to a V1 launch. And while this is, I have my cursor here. While this is it is a tactic, it is not a full tactic for a product launch, right? It is actually going to probably hurt you more than it's going to help you, because it's missing a lot of components, right? And that's what we're here to talk about. So if we talk about kind of the different components that are part of a product release or product launch strategy, I did a little Twitter poll here, and thanks everyone who submitted the results. We had over 1,000 people vote on what you guys are looking to learn more of, and it was basically even across the board, right? 25% of people said user adoption, 22% app reviews. 30% said maximizing ASO, which is App Store optimization, and then 20% said managing bug submissions. And as software developers, we know what it's like, for the whole bug process. It's chaos sometimes, right? But we have some practices and some processes that I'm going to talk to you guys about today that will kind of help you with that. And more importantly, a lot of people are asking themselves, okay, what happens when I launch my product? Right? And how do I gain users, right? How do I get users to adopt my product? How do I make my product a success, right? And in order to answer that question, first we have to ask a very, very difficult question here, right? And that question is, am I building the right product, okay? And I want that to sink in for a second, because this is something that I ask every startup founder. The first thing I ask them is, are you building the right product? And I'm not saying that your idea is bad, right? It's your idea, I guarantee you, is great, right? But what you need to understand from a technical and a business perspective is that user adoption is a tricky beast, right? And what I see a lot of people do is they take the approach of Mr. Kevin Costner here, the Field of Dream approach, where they say, okay, if I build it, they will come. If I build this application, I'm going to launch to the App Store, and all of a sudden there's going to be a bunch of users, using it, right? And that just doesn't happen. Right? It's very rare that happens anyway. You're looking at winning the lottery is the odds of that going to happen. So, but there's ways to make sure that your application is a success, right? And we're going to go into those in a sec. So the first thing you need to do is you need to recognize that you don't want to build a final finished product before your users actually start using it. You want to build an MVP, right? And what is an MVP? Well, you might know that the dictionary definition: an MVP is a minimal viable product with just enough features to gather validated learning about the product itself, right? And that is true, but the important part is that what's highlighted in red here, which is it's just enough features to gather the validated learning about that product, right? So I talked to so many founders and so many enterprise companies and like people of all walks of life who are under the same impression. I have to build this final product in order to get user feedback, right? And I'm going to give you an example here of a video game, right? Well, no one's going to know about my game or how to play it or if they love it unless I actually build it, right? And people use that mentality for everything, okay? But it's not true. And to use a couple big examples, we have Dropbox, which everyone has heard of to this day, right? Dropbox is an amazing case study. When they first founded, no one knew what cloud storage was, right? This was a brand new concept. If you presented it to our parents today, our parents would probably say, no, I don't trust, anything on the cloud, right? And 10 years ago, it was, 50 times, as prevalent, that mentality. So the founders of Dropbox were going to investors and they were saying, we need a substantial amount of money to build this product. And investors would say, well, wait a second, sure, we can invest, but if you show us traction. And they said, well, we can't show you traction unless we actually build a product, and it becomes a chicken and egg situation. So instead, what they did was, instead of building the full product, all they did was they put up a landing page and they spent like $5,000 on a video. And through just a landing page describing what the concept of their product was, they were able to get 75,000 subscribers. That's 75,000 people who all agreed and all said, you know what, once this product is made, I will pay for it, right? So now Dropbox was able to go to investors, not only to gain the investment, but they've also now validated their product without building anything, right? And they got user feedback in that process as well, right? Same thing with Zappos. Zappos is an e-commerce platform that sells shoes. And if you look at inventory, right? To have any type of physical product costs a lot to stock inventory. So the founders of Zappos, instead of trying to go the whole route, build out not only the full e-commerce product, but also the full inventory and infrastructure to ship, to store, to XYZ. What they did, the founders said, you know what? I'm going to go down the street to mom and pop's shoe store, and I'm going to ask people, can I take a picture of your shoes and sell them online? And I'll offer you face value, right? All I'm looking for is to prove this concept. And he was able to do that, right? And then through that, he was able to, in 2008, grow his business up to about $1 billion in sales, and then sell to Amazon in 2009, right? And again, all of this is without building a physical product, right? So let's talk about why this is important, right? Why I use those examples. The biggest challenge that every app and technology founder faces is user adoption. You guys are not alone when you're looking for how do I increase user adoption? How do I retain more users? How do I calculate their LTV? These are not new concepts. Everyone struggles with the same thing, right? And there's a couple different things that you can do to gain users, right? One is to get that initial set of users from just a landing page, from a marketing campaign, right? From a survey. You can get users that way, and you can start to to talk to them. So if we start taking a look at that product launch strategy, right? All right, so this was the first one we went over. We said, okay, we're gonna go from idea to start building, then we do a couple iterations, and then we beta release and we launch. Okay. So that's not enough, right? If we are able to get some feedback before we build the first thing at all, right, we can actually have a community outreach part of that, which is gonna be a big thing. Because now, if we are Dropbox, for instance, right, now we can actually say, okay, well, we have this clickable prototype, right? We have a list of 75,000 people who are at least interested in our product, right? Now we can reach out to them, engage with them even before the product is fully released, and then launch later once the product is fully finished, okay? But that's not it, right? That's only a small piece of it. So let's go through an example of a release strategy. And again, I'm gonna go back just to this slide here, to assume that we're taking this product launch strategy where we do a clickable prototype first, then we are immediately marketing even before the product is ready, right? And then we go into like a beta iteration stage, right? So let's assume we do that, and we have our 75,000 people subscribe. Okay, so now we're getting ready for release of the product. So we have this application. I'm going to call it, let's say, Tinder number 2, okay? We have a lot of people, we have 75,000 people interested in Tinder number 2. And they've gone through and they have focused, they have gone through focus studies with our product. They've tested it on a beta perspective, and we're pretty confident that Tinder number 2 is going to take off. Okay, beautiful. So now we have to get ready for full release. Right? And this is something that a lot of founders and a lot of businesses struggle with. So 75,000 people is not enough, because of the 75,000, probably only 10 to 50% of them will actually respond to those emails and will actually sign up, right? Expect low returns. And obviously the more focused you are, the better, right? So what we want to do instead is we want to approach influencers, right? So influencer marketing is one of the best ways to market your product. And let's say we go and we approach a couple influencers with a total of about 1 million followers. Right? Well, if we have, let's say, 10 macro influencers, and with 1 million total followers, we could expect, if all of them announce on Tuesday that, hey, Tinder number 2 is ready, we could expect maybe about 100,000 people to download the app, because macro influencers are typically going to have slightly less returns on a percentage-wise than micro influencers. So you should expect a lower return. And also platforms like Twitter, like Instagram, like Facebook, they're actually, they make money through ads and through trying to get the word out there. So they actually limit how much audience reach that's organic that their influencers can have, right? So we hit 1 million followers and we're expecting 100,000 views. Okay. Now we want to move on and we want to approach micro influencers. Okay. So micro influencers, if you guys have never done this type of marketing before, micro influencers are a little bit different. So macro influencers, they have large audiences, but it's going to be a slightly less return on a percentage basis. Micro influencers, on the other hand, are going to have extremely specific audiences. And those audiences are going to have a better return because they're going to be more interested in what you're doing. As a perfect example, we launched an app called Mobile Measures, which was focused on the physical therapy space, right? And Ben, the founder of Mobile Measures, he approached different Facebook groups that only had about 10,000 followers apiece, XYZ. And he approached them and he said, I have this cool tool that I think is going to help your community, right? And through those micro influencer groups, he was able to get widespread adoption because every single member of those groups is looking for that thing. Whereas if you have a general macro influencer, a person who is just generally in healthcare, right, their audience is going to be more dispersed. Okay, cool. So we have our micro influencers and we have our macro influencers, right? And we are creating our release strategy. Okay, so what's next? Well, one of the mistakes I see people make all the time is I see them, immediately say, okay, all of our network, all of our community, we are going to launch on Tuesday of next week. So on Tuesday of next week, I want everyone to be ready. And what happens? Well, people hit the very famous App Store your review process. Things get delayed, right? Causes a bunch of headaches. So what I always recommend to every single company is do a quiet App Store release first, about a week in advance of when you actually are planning to launch. Okay, and the reason is no one is going to find your app when you launch it, right? It takes marketing in order to actually find your application. So there's no disadvantage to actually waiting. Okay? So now we're going to wait 4 days. And then on day one, we're not going to have a day one of our actual release, right? We're not going to have all of our influencers and all of the people on our mailing list. We're not going to email all of them and say, okay, download the app. That's actually bad, right? When the App Store and the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, when they're looking at how do you make an application trending, they're looking at a couple of things. They're looking at user downloads, on a day-by-day basis, and also on a weekly basis. They're looking at user retention. They're looking at user usage, right? And they're also looking at a statistic of growth. Okay, so it's much better to have 10,000 people each download an app 10 days in a row than it is to have 100,000 people download an app on day one. Okay, so what I typically recommend to people is I say, okay, let's have day one be about a 10% release. Day two, release about 20% of your audience, right? Day three, release about 30%, so we're at 60% total. And then day four, release 40%, right? So that means that of your total, let's say, 100,000 people, right, on your mailing list, the first day there's 10,000, second day 20,000 are going to get an email, third day 30,000, and the fourth day 40,000. This is essentially going to trick the App Store algorithms into saying, hey, look, it is trending and that trend is growing, right? By doing a strategy like this, we were able to get one of our apps, Fit Girls, which is it was on the App Store. We worked on that a couple years back. We were actually able to get that to #1 on the App Store, beating like all other free apps like Netflix, Google Maps, etc. for I think about 2 or 3 weeks straight. And they saw a lot of organic growth because of that, right? Users that they weren't even on their list started finding it because now it popped up in their feed. Okay, and then after that, we need to get feedback. Okay, so you could be thinking to yourself at this point, like, woohoo, if I follow this strategy, I'm going to get a bunch of users, I'm going to get a bunch of organic growth, right? And everything is going to be perfect, right? And we're going to get 5 stars. This is a screenshot of Mobile Measures, one of the apps I was telling you about, right? And we're going to get 5 stars and everything is going to be fantastic. Well, my question to you is, what happens if that's not the case, right? So what happens if once you launch, you didn't follow maybe the user feedback cycle and getting people's opinions beforehand, and all of a sudden you have a bad review, right? And this actually happens. So this ties into our second part of the talk, which is understanding and managing App Store reviews. And I say understanding, I have that highlighted here because you have to understand your App Store reviews. I see so many times when founders and technologists and project managers, well, I'm actually going to throw some people on the bus, and I'm going to say, typically it's not the developers who are misunderstanding. Typically it's management, right? And I'll straight up say that. People very rarely take the time to dive through these reviews and actually categorize them and quantify them. So this was an app that we did called Van Life about 2 years ago. I think it was the last time we worked on it. And we did a launch strategy with them. And they had a lot of influencers involved. And the first day of launch, right, this is all public information, it's all in the App Store. The first day of launch, they had great turnout, great feedback, a lot of users, right? But then as soon as that free trial started going away, they started going down and declining on their App Store reviews. And if you look at it from a macro level, you're just going to see, oh, this is a 2.5 star app, so the app itself must suck, right? But if you look at it to a micro level, right, and this was the stats at the time that we had taken this, you're going to see that 20% of the actual reports were unhappy with a feature, in this case, Instagram login, right? 30% said there wasn't enough content, and 24% said they don't want to pay for this, right? 20% were bugs, 6% connectivity, and 3% was revolving around privacy and sharing information, right? So this is really important. So when you guys are going through and creating reviewing the App Store submissions, try to quantify them in categories so you can really see what your users are actually asking for. And if this does happen to you, let's say you've already released your application and you are at like a 2 or 3 stars, you're thinking to yourself, okay, how can I recover from this? You can recover. Okay, there's a couple different ways you can. First, as you make new releases, the app stores they actually will take that into consideration, what version of the app it is versus the rating of that version versus prior versions. Right? And the other thing you can do is you can help guide users on giving you feedback. At the end of the day, your users want to be heard. So let them talk to you. There's a really cool tool called Instabug, and there's other tools like it where it's basically just a plugin. And this particular feature of Instabug, if you can see my cursor here, actually allows you to ask your users in the app, would you recommend this? Or what do you think of these features, right? And if they say, very, very likely, if they say, yes, I love this app, well, then take them to the App Store. If they say, I hate this app, right? Stop them there, get their feedback, ask them what they want to tell you, right? And they'll submit that. And then they'll probably won't submit it to the App Store, right? Odds are they won't, because they've already given you the feedback. They just want to be heard, okay? So this all goes as part of that, that user feedback cycle, right? And this is kind of a diagram. I just found this online. There's a bunch of different diagrams related to user feedback cycles, but essentially the stars are where a user, your user should actually jump into the conversation. You need to start with your user, then you need to clarify requirements with your user, then you can develop a feature, then you have users try it, and then you repeat that whole process, right? Okay, cool. And I know I'm flying through this stuff. I want to get through as much information and value as I can to you guys, before the 25-minute time slot is up. So let's talk about bug or ticket submissions. And I have bug crossed off here because we like to call them tickets instead of bugs. The reason is bug assumes something's wrong with the app, right? But if you guys have ever launched a tech product before, you're going to know that your users are going to have varying levels of tech sophistication. So as an example, I remember seeing a review once, and we got a ticket, to a company from one of our clients saying we have a bug, users can't log in. And we said, that's strange. We just QA'd the whole thing. So then all the report said, the bad review was, I can't log in with Instagram. And so after we were able to finally track down, the user and contact them and ask them, turns out they just forgot their password to Instagram. So they couldn't log in because they couldn't authenticate with Instagram, right? And it's had nothing to do with the app. So that's why we like to call them tickets, right? So having a ticket system is so important, right? And this will allow you to basically manage what's really a bug for your actual development team, right? Versus what's just a client request versus what's something else entirely, right? This particular ticketing system is Teamwork Desk. We really like this one because it ties in with Teamwork Projects, which is what we use for project management, but there's a ton of tools out there that you can use. And to the same token with bugs, this is another tool that we use a lot, very frequently. I highly recommend it. It's called Instabug, right? So Instabug, it supports web SDKs, so it's literally just basically a line of code that you just npm install. And when you download and use Instabug, it basically goes to your it goes on the user's device, right? And as they are reporting different issues, it's actually collecting all the information for you that your developers are going to need or that you're going to need to actually debug that issue, right? It's going to give you the device. It's going to give you the steps they took. It's going to give you maybe user attributes, right? And it's customizable. So this is a very, very powerful tool, and I definitely recommend using it. Now, the only caveat to this is that a lot of users care, and laws now care about privacy, okay? So if you were to release this to a production app, you might get sued, right? Especially in California and states and countries where privacy laws are very, very strict, right? This might not be the best approach. So what we like to recommend is to put this kind of thing in that beta cycle of your release strategy. That way you can let users know, hey, in this version, we are collecting more information than we normally do, right? You're opting in, but in the production version, we're not, okay? So just keep that in mind, guys. And Mike, how am I doing on time here, bro? All right.
You're doing good.
Oh, no. Doing good? Okay, cool. Sweet. All right, so Intabug is a tool, right? And it's a tool that can easily be used to kind of help you guys out along this cycle. I want to go over some other tools that are really useful along the entire product launch and like in facilitating a product launch. So many people asked about ASO, like App Store Optimization. And App Store Optimization is a very, very powerful tool. It's just like SEO, right? Except for the App Store. And just like SEO, it's one of those things where you can set it up on your own. You can do research on what keywords you need and what different types of competitors you have and XYZ. There's a product called App Annie, which I personally really like. It's really great for showing you statistics about the industry, so you can make your own decisions. There is another company called GummyCube, and GummyCube is kind of like an ASO services company, right, for that process and for that product. At the end of the day, I don't believe it really matters. It depends on the size of your company and of your initiatives and what your ad spend is on whether you want to do this yourself, right, or whether you want to hire a professional like GummyCube. And there's 1,000 other companies that do this, right? This is just an example. It's up to you. But one thing I will say is that when you're creating a budget and a plan for release, it's so important to have your focus be on the actual community that you're building before you launch, right? Because once you hit the App Store, and if you're focused on ASO and if you're focused on paid ads or like paid search, which is what Google and Apple want you to do, right, to get found, then you're going to be spending a lot of money, right? You're going to have much more diminished returns compared to if you build up your audience organically ahead of time, right? And the reason why is you're competing against everyone else in the space, right? So some other quick things I just want to touch base very briefly on are just some best practices and processes. In your development lifecycle and in this product release strategy, right? We kind of covered that it's a circular strategy. You're going to have to make many iterations, right? So with that said, don't fall under the trap of trying to build stuff yourself, right? If you're building voice over IP, use an API, right? Like Twilio. If you're building chat, use something like QuickBlocks, right? I'm a tinkerer as well, so I know how amazing it feels to try to build a component yourself, but you have to weigh out, right, the success of the product versus the desire to build something yourself for complete control. Because a lot of times, and this is from experience, right, having that complete control over a feature doesn't truly matter as much because users are a little bit flexible on what they want, right? As long as you solve a general problem for them, they're okay. There's also some other practices I'd recommend. This is one of the practices that we call product mapping. This process essentially involves laying out your application from a bird's eye view. And this is going to be really helpful when you're suffering from poor user experience ratings, right? Let's say your users can't really understand how to navigate through your application or where to go, right? One of the reasons that is such an issue is because the founders often get lost in all the complexities of their application and it gets too broad. So by laying out your app in a very bird's eye view, right, it allows you to kind of say, oh, hey, look, this application is getting out of hand here. Let's cut it down a little bit, right? And then you could go into user flows, right? And if we look at what prevents developers from completing tasks on time, right? 47% of developers say that it's actually because of unclear direction. So this will actually help as well. Right? It'll help your development team if you're managing a team, and it'll just help that general life cycle. All right. And the same thing applies for the design team. This might not apply for you guys if you're an individual developer or working on a very small team, right? But I do want to say that statistics from Forrester show that every $1 spent on UI and UX research and design process yields $100 return. So design is a very, very important process. If you do not have a designer on your team or a team of designers, please consider working with one. It will just make the product overall a better product, right? And you can prototype from here too, right? So we talked earlier about going into that product lifecycle, right? And having something clickable, like a quick demo, not the final product. I always recommend to people, before you develop anything, design it out, create a clickable prototype on Marvel or Illustrator or XD, and then deliver that product to your users, get their feedback then, and then you can build it. And designers have processes as well that actually match the development lifecycle, which will help you as well. So this is actually a combination of Sketch and Abstract, two tools, which is essentially source controls like GitHub for the design team. So let's say you hit the situation where your users ask for one feature, that you design it, and then they come back and they say, "Oh crap, we don't actually want this feature anymore." Well, now instead of the design team remaking the designs, they can literally just go back in time, right? And this tool is called Abstract. It's a lifesaver. It's so amazing. All right. And then for getting user feedback, you can do A/B testing. So A/B testing is important, not only from a web perspective, right, which you can use Unbounce for, it's my favorite tool, but also from a mobile perspective as well, right? So on the mobile side, there's Optimizely, right? And Optimizely, it allows you to kind of tie in with your application, with the actual features. Now, we haven't seen wide adoption of this yet on the mobile app side, because I think there's still a lot to do there. So I would love to hear from the community on what you're using for an A/B testing perspective from the actual mobile app side. But on the user adoption side, Unbounce is a really, really cool tool. Okay. And then there's also process tools like Mixmax, LegalZoom, right? If you guys do need a privacy policy, you need to update that as all the states, update. Tools like LegalZoom can really help. So definitely recommend those. And finally, I hope that you are using Ionic as your development framework. People often ask me, what do I think? Does it matter if we're using React or Angular or Vue, right? Well, obviously Vue support isn't complete quite yet, as Max said earlier, but between Angular and React, I don't think it matters. I think it's your personal preference. As long as it's under the Ionic framework, I mean, with all the different tools they have, like Identity Vault and AppFlow, all these tools that allow you to scale from startup to enterprise, I think you're good. So last thing I just kind of want to say and shout out is we talk about this kind of stuff a lot during our meetups, and with COVID, we've turned our Ionic Philly meetup into kind of an online permanently meetup. So please feel free to join us. The URL is meetup.com/IonicPhilly. We'd love to just kind of be part and have you part of the conversation. If you have any other questions as well, feel free to hit me up. My email is jedi@openforge.io. You can hit me up at Jedi Hacks, and our website is there. And this is the team saying thank you and saying goodbye, and best of luck and best journeys to you.